something I'm very much looking forward to speaking with both of you about. One of my favorite topics, and you both raised it in your work, is the nature of relationships, personal, intimate relationships in your practice. And Diego, I know you write so generously on this topic, and so many around the world can just open one of your books or your feed and feel like what you write is speaking to them. You relate to us in such an incredible way. And Jack, you've also been very generous and open in your many, many years of offering your wisdom and teachings in some of your own humbling moments and in relationship and the role that practice did or did not have in preparing us. I might take the liberty of reading. I didn't know if I was going to do this, but I'm going to read a couple sentences from Jack's A Path with Heart. And then I'd love to just take a few minutes and hear you both reflect on relationships and how they're impacted by the Dharma. So Jack, you've just come back from your journeys abroad, and you're a monk, and you write, "But alas, when I returned to the United States as a monk, all of it kind of fell apart. I disrobed, I enrolled in graduate school, got a job driving a taxi, and worked nights at a mental hospital in Boston. I also became involved in an intimate relationship. Although I had arrived back from the monastery clear, spacious, and high, in short order I discovered through my relationship, in the communal household where I lived, and in my graduate work, that my meditation had helped me very little with my human relationships. I was still emotionally immature, acting out the same painful patterns of blame and fear, acceptance and rejection that I had before my Buddhist training. Only the horror now was that I was beginning to see these patterns more clearly." Thank you for being honest with us. That's beautiful. So they're not unrelated, right? I mean, having a deep practice and working on your own healing inevitably prepares us for the intimacy that can bring more of the same. But what have you, I'll start with you, Jack, what have you learned since you wrote this decades ago? And how does your practice help? I know you have a lot of special relationships.
I will say a few things. First of all, I'm in a really wonderful, loving relationship with Trudy Goodman, my beloved, my wife, my partner, for the last decade or 12 years. It's fabulous, as you are with Soren.
Thank you, Jack.
And it's really gorgeous to watch. And I'm not sure I'm allowed to say it, but it's really fun to see that.
Well, we did.
Great. Yeah.
Now you're out of the closet, right? And they're wonderful together. So we're all supporting good relationships. One of the things that's important to understand, it does, as Diego points out, it really helps to have time where you quiet the mind and tend the heart and listen. And our relationships mirror what we learned in relationships in our families. And mine was a pretty painful family, and so we don't know how to do it. And then you think that if you get good at one area, it will carry over in another. But it doesn't work that way. Awareness doesn't automatically carry. So there's people that go to the Dalai Lama, and I love him. He's like the finest human being there is. And they'll ask him questions about marriage or giving birth to a child. It's like, the Dalai Lama has never been married. He never had a kid. You know, you're asking the wrong person. So it turns out that we have to actually direct the same mindful, loving awareness that we give to our breath, our body in meditation, or our own mind. Then we have to turn it and deliberately listen to each other and say the skills of loving awareness and attention and, or self-compassion, now I have to bring to that person that I'm with. I have to listen in the same respectful, non-judgmental way. Mm-hmm. I have to accept them just as I have to accept these things in myself. Of course I can change, but when I've done weddings for people, one of the things that, and I used to do them, I would do during the ceremony is I would say, when you go to a used car lot to buy a car, there's a sign in the window in many of these cars that will say, as is. And I say, you know, you may have all these fantasies about this relationship to come, but I want you to really look at each other. Are you willing to marry this person as is and love them as is? You know? And what I've learned is meditation, therapy, you know, good friends, community, making mistakes and then trying to sort them out, communication. Relationship takes all of the above, as you know, but it also is the place that we learn to love. And what else is more important?
Yeah.
I mean, it was my wife and I, we had been together for about 6 years before we started meditating. And during those 6 years, it was clear that we had a very deep connection. There were a few times where we almost broke up, but our connection was so strong that it kept pulling us back in. But that whole first part of our relationship, it was like living in a hurricane. It was quite chaotic. There was, if you were to add together how much emotional maturity the two of us had, you would get a total of 0. And it was quite difficult. But when we started meditating, ever so slowly, there were tiny amounts of harmony that started entering into our lives. And I think particularly understanding selflessness, understanding that, yes, right, we're here, we're individuals, we're having a conversation, but ultimately, what's really here? It's just ever-changing phenomenon. It's just mind and matter moving at incredibly rapid speeds. It helps you let go of some of that ego, specifically for those moments when arguments happen, right? Because that first half of our relationship, we would argue and each of us would try to win. We would try to win the argument. And like Jack says, nobody wins in a war, right? So we'd both immediately lose. But now we try to do our best to just understand, you know, conflict is arising, anger may be arising, something, you know, this feeling of being upset is there, but let me just take a step back and still try to appreciate your perspective. And in both of us trying to appreciate each other's perspective, we actually learn that if I appreciate her perspective, it actually doesn't negate my own. We're just understanding each other in this moment. And in that ability to understand each other, we can actually find a new middle path where we can then move forward and try to act in better ways. But I really am profoundly grateful to the Dhamma because I think my connection with my wife would have never matured if it weren't for me personally building my awareness of myself, my own traumas, my own conditioning, the way that I would just constantly be reacting. That little bit of equanimity can make such a difference because it allows you to let some love through. I love that in the Buddhist teaching, you know, there is this elimination of craving, which helps you eliminate all of that heavy load, all this mental conditioning. But then what's left over? There's metta, there's loving kindness, there's sympathetic joy, there's compassion, and then there's equanimity. So to be able to give your partner your best, it takes mental training. You have to sort of just teach yourself very intentionally using that practice. And like Jack said, then taking that practice into your everyday life and just trying again. And that's what we ended up doing. And now we've been together for 15 years. And, you know, we still don't agree on everything, but it's beautiful because we take that as an opportunity to practice.
Yeah.
Like, let's see how we can handle this one. And we don't always get it right. You know, we're imperfect people just like everybody else, but it has really been a true joy learning how to navigate the storms together and to be able to support each other because like, you know, if you're a serious meditator, a lot of these meditations, they're purification techniques. So deep stuff is going to come up, right? A lot of us don't meditate necessarily in traditions that just aim towards bliss. No, we meditate to clean out the mind. And when you're cleaning out the mind, every day is not going to be a pretty day. Some days will be a little heavier than others. And to let each other know, we'll wake up and we'll let each other know our emotional barometer and be like, I don't feel that good today. I woke up and I feel sad, or I feel upset, or I'll feel something heavy that's passing through. And being in sort of that pretty consistent communication allows us to just step up for each other. Or if we both feel down, we'll just take it slow that day and do as best as we can, but not judge ourselves as we're moving through the storm.
Yeah.
But I think the practice has been just absolutely critical in allowing us to know ourselves and thus be able to love each other better.
Wonderful that you share your journey and how you've come to where you are and able to birth what you offer. One thing that came up in reflecting on today and just thinking about this was how I know you are so committed to your practice. You and your wife, Sarah, are just, I love this example you give about you set your year out based on when you're going to be on retreat. And I know that you just emerged yourself from a 45-day Vipassana retreat, I believe, which is beautiful in and of itself. One of the guests was asking earlier, how does somebody who doesn't have 45 days to go on a Vipassana retreat because of their life circumstances or tolerance or appetite or whatever it might be, how do we start small, or how do we use small snippets of practice? And this is really a question for both of you.
Yeah.
How do we adapt to what we can commit to and what we can do for our own healing in whatever type of role or life circumstances we find ourselves in?
I think that's something that it's really personal, right? We have to sort of take a good look at what our capacity level is, like not just in our life and the different responsibilities that we have, but we also have to take into account our own conditioning, our own trauma, and finding sort of that sweet spot where it's something that is challenging, but at the same time not overwhelming. You don't want to bring up so many things that then you run away from the inward process. You no longer want to reflect or get to know yourself because you are horrified by what's inside of you.
Yeah.
But you want to find that sweet spot so that you can continue taking sustainable steps inward and start doing that liberational work. And I think it's beautiful. I mean, Jack was just talking about Cloud Sangha. That sounds something that it sounds very accessible. And there's so many different entry points that are available into your own internal landscape now. And it's not just about being able to do a 45-day course or a 10-day meditation course. If you can, I highly advise that you go do it. But if you can't, totally reasonable, and you can still find different techniques and practices that can help you start developing your equanimity, start developing your sense of awareness, and developing your compassion. And that's what's important, is if you do what you can, then we're all better off, including yourself. So,
And Jack?
Yeah, thank you, Diego. That's beautiful, and we are all better off. It's like Thich Nhat Hanh's expression where he said, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat remained steady and calm, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive. And then you say, well, who's that person? And as Miss Piggy would say, moi. Turns out that you can be that person, or you become that person. So here's a few things to add to what you said so beautifully, Diego. One is you can start small, as you said, and I'll give you an example of really small, because Mang, our dear friend who helped start Search Inside Yourself Leadership, did a teaching for people in Ukraine last week, just before I did. And there's so much trauma, and it's so hard for people to close your eyes and go into your body. It's just carrying so much. He taught micro meditations. 1 mindful breath. How is that? 3 mindful breaths. Or if you can't sit because you're carrying the grief or something difficult in your life, do walking meditation practice. There are very simple, steady and grounding things, and in a minute, I mean, the neuroscience, Richie was here, Richie Davidson, in even 60 seconds, you start to re-regulate your nervous system, and you also come to a place where you can see with greater clarity. So there's that. One is making it simple. The second is the incredible need for community. We're such an individualistic nation, and the idea that you're supposed to meditate on your own, yeah, you can have sex on your own too, it's all right. But it's kind of better with other people for the most part, And we really need community, whether it is a meditation buddy who you set your alarm and sit with every day or 3 times a week, whether it's Cloud Sangha or some other thing where you join. We actually, and traditionally where it's taught, wherever 2 or more are gathered in his name, whether it's satsang or sangha or minyan, we need to support each other. And in our culture, our speedy consumer, look at your calendar culture, we need each other. And so that becomes something that you can somehow build into in a deep way to help you sustain your practice. And I forget the third thing, so
Back.
you know.
We'll come back.